Hello and welcome to the Leaders Council podcast with me, Joshua Jackson. This podcast, just like the Leaders Council itself, is all about recognising and celebrating the people who keep this great country running. We exist to give leaders a voice outside of their own organisations and to support them in the same way that they support their staff every single day of the week. If you are in a leadership position yourself and would like to have your voice heard on the national stage, please go to leaderscouncil.co.uk/apply. Each week on this programme, I'm joined by a different leadership figure from the world of business, education, politics, sports, or even from local communities, in the aim of truly discovering who these people are that get up every morning and make this great country work. We get their take on the current economic and political landscape of the UK and discuss everything from supply chain headaches to good quality hospitality, and of course the success and the innovation that makes it all worthwhile in the end. On today's programme, I'm delighted to be joined by Terence Carvalho, the General Manager of Becketts, Southsea. Terence, welcome onto the show.
Hello, thanks for having me.
No, not a problem at all. It's absolutely fantastic to be having you on today. As listeners are about to find out, the amount that you've been doing over the last 18 months, not only keeping a restaurant going and supporting staff, but helping your local community in various ways. It's going to be really interesting to be hearing your story. But, it's always, one thing we can't ignore, the COVID situation, business interruption.
Yep.
How's everything been over the last year, 18 months?
Everybody has been in the same boat. Nobody's enjoyed the last 18 months. It's been horrific. Was it 3 lockdowns, a circuit breaker? It's been stop, start for the last 18 months. But fortunately, this is probably the longest period we've had open since COVID. So hopefully this is it now. We can stay open. We can keep doing the testing, the vaccinations are going well. We can keep going and get back to normal life as soon as we can. We're only around the corner now from Christmas, so hopefully we can all enjoy a great Christmas and soon put this all behind us.
That is a horrible point to bring up already there, Terence, that we're just around the corner from Christmas, especially for somebody that works in your profession as well. But, given that you are the general manager of a really high quality restaurant, bar, really lovely, atmosphere and building, and have won sort of so many awards over the past couple of years, despite all of the challenges, you must really have some great insights into what it's been like to sort of run a business, keep it going, despite, as you say, all of the business interruption and the closures. How did you cope with that? What were you feeling like every time that you had to lock down, you had to put staff on furlough, you had to, throw out X amounts of thousands worth of stock that may have been perishable?
Horrible, horrific. The first things we would have to do was phone up customers to let them know we're cancelling bookings. That took almost a week worth, having to go through 3 to potentially 6 months worth of bookings to cancel them. We had to make a decision whether to, give everyone refunds and deposits, refunds on christenings, on weddings, on baby showers, when we knew, in fact, we had no idea how long it would be till we get any income coming back to the business. And then you're obviously trying to juggle this along with trying to manage the welfare of your staff. Mental health has been something which has been so big, not just in hospitality, but in the whole world. With celebrities sort of talking about mental health, a lot more people, a lot more aware of their own mental health. And especially during COVID, where we were all locked in our homes, couldn't do anything, couldn't see family, couldn't see friends, it became even harder, especially when you have to manage your staff. Just because we were on furlough and couldn't go to work, it didn't mean that I couldn't speak to my staff. I still felt I had a duty to make sure they were okay, make sure they knew exactly what I was expecting when we did reopen, but also for them to know that I was there in case they needed anything, whether that be them testing positive for COVID and me having to drop off supplies to them, or whether they just needed somebody to vent to about government decisions. But it was more like being a therapist at times rather than a manager, which was probably the only time really in my whole hospitality career where I've been so out of control of a situation that had to maintain some kind of control.
That's a really good point there. None of this was in anybody's control. It was always outside events that have, everyone's had to adapt to, really. Everyone's had to sort of stand up and, make themselves accountable for their actions, but also the challenges then of being in that business leading position. It's great to hear that you are, supporting the staff there. And, do you think that over this time, your leadership style has changed? Do you think that you've, had to become more empathic, more or stronger with the way that you're dealing with staff to make sure that when the opportunities to come back into work were there, that people were there to work?
I think if anything, I've had to be more resilient because no matter how my staff were feeling, or if they were feeling bad about COVID or about coming back, the nerves of what to do in what situation, wearing masks, all these little things which were barriers in terms of working, I had to try and remain as focused as possible and be as positive as possible and let the staff know that no matter what happened, I had their backs. And knowing that our job was to, keep the business going. We had no idea what it was going to be like when we opened the doors for the first time. Fortunately, since we opened the doors from the first lockdown to the second lockdown to the third lockdown, we've been extremely busy, and the staff have taken that upon themselves. They've come back stronger. And I think they've come back more resilient as well. I have great confidence in them. They just seem to adapt to any situation which is thrown in front of them. And regardless how tough the situation is, they seem to just bounce back stronger, and they're always smiling. So I'm very fortunate in the fact that I've got a great team who just always are always happy to do their job and to come in and do the best they can.
That's really, a positive thing there, that you have the team that you can rely on. It's not been the same across the country, when you are seeing such challenges for the hospitality industry, getting staff back into the industry, making, so many people have had different sort of mindsets that have been going on, wanting to move out of the cities, wanting to have a better work-life balance, not appreciating potentially the culture. And that seems then that if your staff are wanting to come back, that you've really instilled that quality culture within the organisation, that they're willing to jump back into the fray. Have you seen any of those challenges that others have within the hospitality industry, or has it been relatively smooth sailing when it's come to getting everybody back and being able to reopen the doors?
Staffing's certainly been an issue, in particular with getting chefs back. A number of the chefs who were in the industry have gone off during lockdown, retrained and gone into different industries. And obviously, you can completely understand why they wouldn't come back to hospitality. And if they found a job which they've got 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, every evening off, bank holidays off, you can get the attraction of that. However, the atmosphere and the family sort of atmosphere that you build within hospitality is second to none. There isn't a industry like hospitality. There isn't an industry which works so hard but has such big rewards at the end of it. I mean, just for, if you're working in an office 9 to 5, at the end of that 5 o'clock shift, you just go home. At the end of a hospitality shift, we all sit together. We talk about how the shift went. We talk about each other's plans. We talk about the weekend. We talk about what's coming up. We talk about, the Victorious Festival we just had. We all speaking to each other. So we're constantly in communication, which I think when we're talking about things like mental health, it's actually a really handy environment to work in, because we don't just come to work, finish, and then go home. We're actively communicating with each other all the time.
I think that's very much something that anybody, myself included, that's worked within the hospitality industry knows. The people that are on your shoulder, that are working there, that are having to deal with the stresses and the rushes and the pressure, and obviously the long hours and the late nights. It becomes like a second family, and that is something, again, that why people stay within the industry and they love it. And it really is that culture there, again, that makes people, excel within what is a lot of the time an underappreciated and very hard working environments. But during this time as well, it's been great following your own personal story. When the restaurant shut down, you didn't just stay at home. You didn't just think, oh well, this is an opportunity for me to take some time off. You really stood up, you got involved in the local community, you were running a vaccination centre, being on the front lines there and, really helping to sort of get over this pandemic across the UK. And, how did you find that? Was that a change? Was it transferable skill? Was it something that you're going to sort of treasure as a new experience?
Yeah. The first lockdown, I was at home for 2-3 months, and I was just so bored. I'm not used to being home a day, let alone for months on end. So it was really tough. But this time round, an opportunity came up. I was asked whether I wanted to help out in managing a COVID test centre, and I jumped at it. I wanted to do something for Portsmouth. I wanted to give back. I wanted to try something different because, obviously I've never worked for public health. I'd never worked for the local council before. So this was something where I could get my teeth into, which was completely different to the industry that I'd worked in, but at the same time to see whether I could adapt my managerial skills into a completely different environment. And yeah, I did that for 7 months. So, I've just left. So now my focus is solely on Becketts. But yeah, it was a great thing to get involved in. I'm pleased I said yes to the opportunity. And yeah, I certainly learned not a lot, not just about the public health industry itself, but also how I've had to adapt as a manager, and things that I learned maybe at the test centre, which I had to take to Beckett in terms of changing the way that I deal with certain situations.
So, Terence, I can imagine that there was actually a lot of pressure involved in making sure, you're holding on to the safety protocols. People are coming in to get tested, whilst people are asked to be staying at home if they have symptoms. I am sure that there were many that turned up that, did you have to have difficult conversations to say, actually, you are displaying symptoms, you can't come in for your test, this is time for you to go home? Or was it, relatively smooth sailing, that people were abiding by the rules, that people were patient, that there was that community, atmosphere whilst you were having to get people through the doors?
I'm a bit of both, actually. I think it was rare. You did have the odd occasion where there was a lot of pressure to deal with certain situations where you'd be asked hundreds and hundreds of questions as if you were a physician or work for the NHS directly, and actually you're just there managing a test centre. You're not a doctor, you're not a nurse, you can't answer all these questions, but at the same time you were expected to be able to help out as much as you can. And obviously trying to refer people to go to their doctors or going to get a test elsewhere, people were quite hesitant to. They wanted their situation dealt with there and then. But luckily, working in hospitality, you deal with these issues on a daily basis. You deal with some very irrational things at sometimes, and sometimes you're dealing with floods and fires and all sorts. So you're trying to manage loads of things. So for me, dealing with a person who's right in front of you, it's in your control. Whereas in hospitality, there's things that are not in control. You could be serving a full restaurant and suddenly the electricity goes. That's a big issue. Whereas this issue, if I didn't have the answer, I had a great team behind me who I could go find the answer from, or as simple as going onto the government website and finding the exact answer for what specific test this person needed to go abroad. Obviously, that could be difficult because the government weren't great at updating the website, but there were things that you had which you could refer to.
And that's been a lot of part of the problem, hasn't it? The bureaucratic cogs turning so slowly at points, or turning too quickly at others, and people struggling to sort of catch up. But it's great to hear that obviously you took that opportunity to jump into that community aspect to heighten your skills and not just sort of sit at home. It was as I say, an interesting learning experience. But you've also recently been voted onto the board of trustees for a local education charity, the Literacy Hubs. What's all that about?
Yeah. Well, I was approached by a lovely lady called Jackie, who's the CEO. She's the chair of the organisation. I had heard a few things about the Literacy Hub, but I'll be honest, I didn't know too much about it. I knew of it, but I didn't know of what the organisation actually did. So essentially, it's about giving younger people the chance to really improve their literacy skills, especially those who are going from the the jump between primary school to secondary school. And it was something which I was really interested in because there was something which came up that Portsmouth had the lowest percentage in literacy in young children in the country, which really hit home for me because I was just amazed. Growing up, I was not the biggest reader, yet my reading levels were always really high. If there was a book or something that I wasn't interested in, which I had to learn from school, it just wouldn't go in. If it was something about football, then it would go straight in. I had to be interested in the subject. But for me, it was, I was thinking, well, I'm really fortunate. I had a great level of reading because my parents pushed me to be able to read and the school pushed me to read. But actually, if I didn't have those people pushing me, then I'd probably be in the same state as these kids are now. And of course, with lockdown as well, not being able to go to school, having to do online lessons, I can imagine that is even tougher. So when I was asked to become involved in this charity, I just thought, yeah, you know what, I want to do something for the city. And if there's something more I could do for Portsmouth and make a difference in people's lives, then I absolutely have to do that.
It's a really laudable attitude that wanting to take on the roles and get involved for your local community, your city. It's because of people like you that have stood up that this is such a great country to be in, and that this is exactly what we want to hear on this podcast of the little extras that business leaders are doing to stand up, as you say, not only for your staff but for people that you don't know, for people that may not be sort of in as fortunate a position or helping people to get to that fortunate position, really. So that's really incredible to hear. But from your own perspective as well, it's been a case, and going back to Becketts, it's been a case of award after award after award over the last couple of years, which is again testament to the quality of your leadership style and the team around you, the owners, and the latest was just this week, I believe, where you've been shortlisted shortlisted for hospitality management and team of the year, I believe.
Yeah, so that one actually came through just this morning. So we won another award, so that's the 9th in 2 years. So yeah, it's been a crazy 2 years, considering I think 13, 14 months of that we were closed. So the fact that we've still come back stronger, we're still winning awards, it's just amazing, really, and testament to the great work that the front of house, the kitchen team, and the owners have done. We've all had difficulties, but we've all come together and come back stronger.
And I know there was another as well that unfortunately you didn't manage to win, but you were quite proud of being shortlisted for, and that was the Entrepreneur of the Year at the Business Excellence Awards 2021. How did that come about, and what was your sort of feeling on that?
Yeah, to be honest, I was quite embarrassed when I was told I had been nominated for that, because in my opinion, I should not have been even on the list, because I'm not an entrepreneur. I don't own Beckett. I manage it, but I'm not an entrepreneur. So I had to be very, obviously I was proud to be listed for it, but at the same time embarrassed, because I did not feel like I should have been on that list with some incredible entrepreneurs who are entrepreneurs in the city. So of course, having to sort of go through the whole charade of that was, it wasn't fun, but I got some great messages of support. It wasn't a great surprise I didn't win. So yeah, that's better left in the past, but we'll see. There will be more awards, I'm sure.
Absolutely, but I can imagine there are a few things that you took from that as well. Again, learning from the difficulties of potentially being in a position that you didn't sort of think that you found yourself in, but still, it is a reflection of what community thinks about you, given the extras that you've been putting in. And whilst you say entrepreneurship tends to be around having businesses and sort of employing staff and things like that, it's not just about that. It is about sort of stepping up and making sure that you're taking on new challenges and being around new things. And I'm sure that's exactly why you were shortlisted for it. But something to think about for the future, and maybe sort of wanting to start your own business further down the line, and hopefully got a good few connections from it. But we've obviously spoken, you've mentioned it a couple of times throughout this, making sure that mental health was on top of your list of priorities for dealing with staff and for helping those people around you. This pandemic hasn't just been about business. It's been about the stresses on the individual, the outside pressures of people that are worried about their jobs, but also worried about their families, and then actually the fact that there is a disease going out there that is hard to pinpoint who has what. How did you protect your own health during this time? It's all right saying that you've supported others, but a lot of the time it's about making sure that you yourself are healthy. Without you being healthy, you can't help others. Are there any sort of tips that you'd like to share there, or experiences?
Well, the first lockdown, I did a lot of online courses. I did some courses on things which I probably wouldn't normally touch. So I did a few finance, accounts sort of courses just to keep my mind active, because I could feel myself after the second or third day of being locked down that I was just brain dead. I felt like I wasn't doing anything. So I thought, okay, I need to keep active, need to keep doing stuff. So I started to do that. I was definitely reading a lot more as well. I did read a few leadership books. I was constantly on the news as well. I don't know why, because that didn't help. I was obsessed with the COVID case numbers and how many people were affected by county or by age group. You sort of get lost in the statistics, and then eventually I just thought, I'm going to stop looking at this. This is not really helping. But I kept in constant communication with some of the staff members, making sure they were okay. So that kept me busy as well, because they were, they seemed to have been struggling more than I was. And then obviously the COVID test centre came about. So that helped me focus in a different way. And of course, although I was working, nothing was open. So I couldn't do anything other than go to work, go home, go to work, go home, go to work, go home. And that was a daily occurrence. There was nowhere to sort of offlay any stress. It was just work and home. But I truly believe that in these sort of times, the more resilient you are, and the more you can sort of recover from adversity, that when those hard times do come again, you know exactly what to do, you know what to do with your own health, and you just stay focused on the goal. And the goal was always to get Becketts open as quickly as possible. And that's why I was sort of obsessed with the news, because I wanted to know, when can we open? When can I start planning to get staff in? When can I start doing training? When can I get the staff back into the mindset of we're going back full on, it's going to be back to doing full-time hours, being very busy all the time. So I think for me, it was always seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and just keep going.
That is a very interesting way. A lot of business leaders that I talk to, they've had sort of support groups, helping them, to speak to their peers about the issues that only sort of people in their position can understand and know. And obviously yourself, you just seem to have taken it on, shouldered the responsibility, got out there and done more. And that's another perfect way of dealing with it, rather than just sort of sitting at home and watching the news. It hasn't been great when people are just refreshing that live update on the BBC and getting more and more sort of panicked and drawn in to the issues. But that is a problem with sort of modern news, and the fact that the bad news sells. But that's a wider issue rather than something we should probably steer clear of today. But so how are you sort of looking forwards now? Are you committed still to the hospitality industry? Do you see yourself staying here for the foreseeable?
Well, it's been 14 years, so my career is sort of built on it, really. Whether I would stay in hospitality, I don't know. But what I do know is, over the next year, maybe 2 years, that my focus will be on Becketts. We're not out of the woods with COVID yet. There's still going to be so much hardship. Furlough comes to an end of this month. We'll feel the impact of that, I'm sure. People will lose their jobs. People will lose their homes. There's a lot more hardship to come. And then also, VAT rises, with the Chancellor changing his mind on some of the VAT rates. So that will have an impact into not just this year, but the next year as well. So this time next year, we could still be not fighting for survival, but still fighting. The industry is ravaged at the moment. You look at retail, it's all online sales. You're looking at the high streets, there's shop closures all the time. So it's not over yet, but I'm ready for the fight. Keep Becketts on top of the perch as we can, and just keep going. But in terms of my own personal career, I'm not sure. Maybe this will be the last hospitality job for me. Maybe it won't, but we'll see. At the moment, the focus is just Becketts, and we'll see what happens.
That's a good way to think about it as well. Maintain focus on what you're looking at right now, and sort of have a maybe a broad brush idea of where you want to end up, but sort of don't commit to it during this time. It is right that you are wanting to look after the business and look after those around you to as you say, get through the issues. And speaking more broadly about just sort of the next 12 months and how you see it. Obviously there are supply chain issues right now, there are staffing issues with, the impact of Brexit being felt. There is that Christmas period coming up. There is still on the horizon the sort of threat of more COVID restrictions or sort of lockdowns, circuit breakers, small challenges that could be felt over this winter period. Do you think that the next 12 months will be more positive, or do you actually think that it is going to be, a real struggle?
I think we just have to be realistic. The vaccination's going well. The issue we have, I think the 16 to 24-year-olds, the take-up's not been great. And I don't think social media helps with that. But the good thing is that the cases are lower compared to, in each country, in each case by 100,000, which we're comparing to daily. It has tailed off. But of course, the schools go back this week. Will there be an impact? So I think all the long-term plans that we used to make before, they're slightly short-term plans now. It's more like looking forward to the next 2 or 3 months rather than 6 to 9 months. Because, last time when we had to close down, we were given a week's notice and then we had to throw away all the stock, let all the staff know. And of course, when you go into these kinds of lockdowns, you might lose staff. Staff might find new jobs. They might think it's time to leave the industry. So you're having to cope with those all very last minute, very short-term issues. But I think at the same time, when you're in a managerial position, that it's your job to think about those things all the time. And unfortunately, you have all these stresses all the time, but you're in a job where that's what you have to deal with. That's your job, and you just have to do it the best you can.
That's, again, a really interesting viewpoint, just dealing with it as things come, dealing with the events, dear boy events, as the saying goes. There are going to be so many things outside of your particular control, but it seems, from your mindset, from the way that you are as a person, that you're able to rise to these challenges, that you are able to adapt and overcome. And I think that's a really great sort of way to finish this interview, Terence. It's been an absolute pleasure sort of speaking to you, learning about your particular mindsets and, how you've, as you say, again, risen to the challenges and really, been a positive force for Portsmouth, for your local community, for Becketts, for the vaccination centre, for those that are wanting and struggling with their literacy, over the past sort of 12 months of fantastic, sort of resume during some of the most difficult periods that this country's faced since World War II. So I'd like to offer my, personal congratulations whilst I have the chance. And again, I'd love to have you back on in a few months once you've got a clearer picture of, how the hospitality industry has been, and to hear a little bit more in depth, about, the business running.
That'll be amazing. Thank you very much for having me.
Not a problem at all, Terence. Thank you. That was Terence Carvalho, General Manager of Becketts Southsea. A fantastic interview exploring community challenges to hospitality and Terence's plans for the future. Thank you all very much for listening to this episode of the Leaders Council podcast, and I wish you well for the ongoing week.